Hello, welcome. Sorry about that. Um, I swear I had breakfast and have a coffee right in front of me that I've even been drinking. So, let's get into it. See if I can't get this going. Wonderful. Okay. So, let's see about watching a thing. I'm just defaulting to this now because it works a little easier. Okay, so Shazam. Perfect. Right. So, 2 weeks ago, it had snowed. It was on top of mostly non snow. It was cold, but there was not a whole lot going on. It was a bit of a week. It continued to snow since then. I did get some stuff done, but it's going to be mostly unnoticeable. Oh, drink my coffee. I hope we're all doing well today and taking care of ourselves. I'm doing my best to do so. It's cold outside, and I absolutely forgot to close my door all the way last night. So I had a bit of a cold night. Didn't quite know why, just thought it was cold outside. It's fine, I'm fine. But that's the problem with shoddy workmanship and living in a place like this. Is you end up with a lot of questionable things, for sure. But make the most of it, do our best, keep living the life. It sounds like my voice is a little rough. I've been doing a visual novel. Got really into Paranormasight last night. Super good. Really digging it. Honestly, debating continuing it after this as opposed to Fantasy Life, but I really should get back to Fantasy Life. Still have a whole lot to do in that game. Oh boy. I've been, again, holding a walking stick while I go through these walks because there's a coyote around. And I know there's a coyote around because you can see the tracks, either in the mud or the snow. And I can see it chasing the deer and chasing the rabbits. And it's amazing how coyotes are one of those animals whose defense mechanism is not necessarily for themselves. It's for the species, it's for the colony or whatever the group of coyotes is. And so, even in the most bloodthirsty of. I'm not dying, I promise. I stabilized. You see how it yells at me? Anyway, that's coyotes. So, even in the most brutal person, you have to think twice about if you were going to kill or uh, maim a coyote. Because the way they work is those howls that they're so famous for. Those go out at night to check in to see who's alive. And if the number is lower than previous, it puts the females into esters, and there are more coyote puppies. So you end up with more than you had last time. Because I don't think they just have one or two, it's a fair amount. So maybe it's like in that range, though. Anyway, it tries to keep the population at what it can sustain. So, moreover, I'm glad I was able to get this a little bit more managed, but uh, if we were to kill this coyote, it might only end up with more coyotes. So you either have to be really aggressive in making sure their population is lowered, or just deter them enough to make it so they don't want to come back. And I'm not fully sure how to do that, but so I'm just kind of leaving them alone, hoping there's not enough food for them to want to stay around. But with the bunnies and the deer, there clearly is. So not sure what we're going to do about that except live with them. It's part of the ecosystem. In theory, we shouldn't need hunters, but hunters happen because we've created an ecosystem that's imbalanced towards the uh, towards the herbivores and non-predators. So when those thrive out of control, they need to get managed somehow. And I'm sure the hunters and the people in conservation societies would prefer that not be the case. You know, they want to keep giving out hunting licenses and tags and all this jazz. In America, that is. I'm pretty much only speaking from how we do it. And honestly, it's a pretty good system. I mean, if you're going to have spaces where people exist, it's not exactly conducive to have predators that are able to kill people. But in terms of nature and keeping that in a better place, yeah, you kind of gotta take the good with the bad. So understand your place in the hierarchy. We are on the same level as bears, but below bears. Bears still have the edge on us. Wolves were in that range too, if we were actually managing and being the group of people that we would be having an actual group with the athletics to actually hunt the way we're supposed to. It still blows my mind that humans are persistence hunters. We are built to track and pursue an animal until it is just exhausted. That's how we do it. We basically nag them and keep them running until they cannot run anymore. And then we catch up to them. So, um, at some level, we should have that in us. But too often, we've forgotten about that. We've neglected our endurance. And there's the hawk that I saw last week. It's good. I am unsure what type of bird of prey this is, what kind of raptor, but it's super cool whenever you see a giant ass bird. um, so yeah, I try to think about that very often in getting out and doing things because it makes sense that there are a lot of cardiovascular disease and different things that go along with not being active enough. I find it really interesting that my diabetes um, functions very differently when I'm out working or even just taking this walk to record this. I swear, I had breakfast. I have coffee. I was at 140 before I took my walk. After I take my walk, I was down, it said, into the 70s. Yeah, I think it hit 69 just before it started curling back up. But all the same, um, I didn't dose that much. I dosed enough for my breakfast. It shouldn't And if I'm not doing anything, the ghost does nothing. If I'm just stagnant, if I'm playing games or sorting stuff, it does nothing. Zero movement. But all of that's dependent on mood and stress and everything else, so it's hard to keep track of these kinds of factors. But with the ones we can see, and I imagine that there are cholesterol and other cardiovascular things that are affected here as well. Just how things move through your body, digestion, all that jazz. It's amazing what a 10-minute walk can do. And this is, 20. So that might be the key, is getting outside into nature, walking, maybe not even nature specifically, but probably preferred, having a higher connection with pure oxygen, good air quality. Probably makes that a little bit better, but just getting out and doing something for 10 to 20 minutes really has a major effect on your body. And I can say that for certain. I know there's a lot of people out there who have very, um, it feels questionable. It feels woo woo. It feels very, um, like, what do you know? You're just saying stuff. This is just propaganda from somewhere that landed somewhere along the way. There's no way something so simple as a 10 to 20-minute walk will have a dramatic effect on your body. But being a personal Tamagotchi, uh, I can tell you that it does have an effect. It matters. I love that, though. This is really cool. It's completely blocked off, but it has a hole to fall into. But yeah, make it easy to be distracted. Make it easy to wander. Give yourself that little bit of nature and possibly uncomfortability. It's it's good. It really does matter. It really does change things. I'm not a doctor. You can't take my advice and use it against me. I am not giving out any medical advice. All of this needs more research. I don't think anyone's ever going to do it though. However, it's very sound. I can't stress enough that I am not a doctor, and nothing I say should be construed as medical advice. But I would love to see studies. I would love to see people researching the effects of walking 10 to 20 minutes after meals. If not just on diabetes, but on general health, on heart disease, on any of it. Because we are struggling as a species to stay alive in a time of wealth. We have so much wealth in food, in air, in the ability to clean our water, but we keep polluting it. We keep adding more garbage to our landscape. We keep making everything worse for ourselves. So, and it's all for the sake of convenience. Like, we'd rather not know where these things come from or what to do with them after the fact. I'd love to have better answers for recycling my own products, like a plastic chipper that I could turn into 3D filament and have a 3D printer. That would be really cool. I'm really at a loss for what to do with glass, though. I could tumble it, could reuse it. Like, glass is a weird one. I'm not quite sure on that front. I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of ideas. I know there's a lot of art out there for stained glass. That's a really cool medium. Um, and that goes along with the softer metal that you can kind of like solder the two pieces together to make the big art. And that's always such a cool medium. It turns out really well. It's so cool. Big fan. Um, but as for like practical things to do with old glass, I'm really at a loss, and I should look that one up. Because that's tricky. Like, I suppose I could, like, I probably need a forge if I were going to try to attempt to melt glass back down into a liquid to try to make it a sheet again. But unsure what the purpose of that would be, because it would be a very different kind of glass. Be much more rough, much less see-through. But maybe not. Maybe I'm overestimating what is required to manipulate glass. Who knows? It's more things to look into, for sure. There's a wealth of knowledge out there that the average person doesn't think to have or look into. It's very simple to fall into the same traps that get us caught in the first place of assuming things are really hard, assuming things are really dangerous, because pottery can be extremely dangerous. And I'm assuming it's like pottery. I could be completely wrong, but so pottery is dangerous because if you do not let the clay dry out completely, if there's a water pocket in the clay, if you didn't do your due diligence in making sure it's nice, it can explode and fire molten shards of clay, which no one wants to be around. But we tend not to think about that. It's part of mastery is being good at things and understanding why we do the things we do. It's depending on what we're doing and how we're doing it, there's a lot to be gained just by knowledge. There's so much that we could be doing and doing better if we only knew better. And a lot of us wouldn't, though. Like, there is definitely a group of people who don't want to change. They want to do things the way they do it. They just want to keep things as they are, regardless of new information or changes in society. I know I still mask up when the rest of the world is excited that they don't have to anymore. And that is frustrating because it should be one of those things where we learned something, right? We learned that masks are good. They keep us healthy. Somewhere along the way, it became, this mask is uncomfortable and doesn't do anything. Like, not quite. While, yeah, it does suck to wear the mask and it is uncomfortable, they could make more comfortable masks. Like, that's an option too that they really didn't make very clear. I found out a way to double mask. So if I wear a cloth mask under my N95, it manages a lot of the scratchiness. I love the way this ice is forming. You get to see the crystals. Oh, so good. But I'm honestly really upset because there's a big event that's happening and a whole bunch of people who I thought I was friends with are really excited that masking and vaccination restrictions are being lifted for this big event. It scares the hell out of me. I wasn't going before because it is a big event and it is going to, have its own problems. It's a couple days of camping, pretty close to people. So I already had reservations, but when everyone was at least vaccinated, when everyone at least, was kind of aware that they should be wearing masks when they're close to people, maybe not, like, if they do have to be unmasked, being far apart from each other. But without these safeguards, without people who are going to continue to follow best practices, because there are people who are still dying from the pandemic that we are still in. Reminder. It's a lot. And you can see the tracks of the coyote that I'm almost following at this point. It's a very sharp turn. It's very surprised. But they going after this rabbit, so off they go. Um yeah, it's disappointing to say the least. It's upsetting and concerning for sure. I I I want people to make good decisions and be smart, and I would love to see my friends again. I'd love to be part of the group and be able to carry on like normal, but current life is not normal. We are not back to normal. Things have not gotten better. We are still in this, but it feels like no one really wants to. These are deer, by the way, deer tracks. We've got the ice very minimally solid. Uh, but that goes into things. I was thinking about this on the walk. People like to push boundaries. We need to experience and see things that would be bad for us. Poking at the ice is an example of that. It strikes our very core because it's that horror game of like, oh, if I stepped there, what would happen? I'd fall on the ice. That would be really bad. And like, especially if you have to put a little bit of weight on it to see and you get thrown off just a little off balance, you get that adrenaline rush of like, oh, I could have died. And people like that because it means that they didn't die. It means that they are in a situation where they can experience that thrill of, I almost died without dying. And we like that because of our anxiety. The things that made us capable of living in the wild in the first place. We learned, like, hey, if I can get away from the wild animal, I can survive. I can do it. Until it turns into, like, oh shit, I nearly died. I shouldn't do that anymore. I shouldn't poke the bear because I can barely survive from that. We see people die from that in old eras. And still today, like, don't poke the bear. People who know, know. People who don't, think of Yogi and teddy bears, and it's not great. But it goes into, it's all the same thing. People want to be as comfortable as they can while doing as little as they can. So if there is an easy way to eat a meal that they don't have to do anything for, like delivery is a great reference to this. Getting food delivered is going to be a lot less healthy and a lot worse for you than food you make yourself. And even more so out of food you grow yourself that you turn into a thing. So, even though people like the homegrown, homemade meal, and probably like it the most, there's not access. It's really hard to do. There's a lot of steps involved. There's generational wealth involved. You need to have the space to grow things and the knowledge to how to make them and process them and keep them for seasons. We just live in a little bit of a messed up world that got away from things where it made sense to take other people in consideration and do what's best for the group rather than the individual. So I'm sad about not going to many campouts if things are going to continue um, in this direction, because people are dumb and they just want to get back to the fun thing, the easy thing. But there's that. I forget how the saying goes, but it's something along the lines of the the ignorance is bliss. Yeah. So the ignorant are gonna do what they want to. They're gonna have fun. They might die. They might not care. Whereas the informed and the people who are aware of these things are gonna stress. They're gonna do what they can to take the precautions they need to. And they too might die. But they might stave things off or do a little bit better in the overall. But they're going to have a more tortured existence, not being able to do the enjoyable thing because they know it's bad for you. it's it's a rough existence for sure. And I don't know the answer on that one. It feels bad for sure. But um unmasking, yeah. Cloth mask N95, you get a lot more comfy of a existence. That's my pro tip there. And then you're double masking anyway. And you can wash the cloth mask, keep the N95 as um, clean as possible. But even when you do it, you see the deterioration. You can see when things aren't going great on it. I hope things get figured out. I hope society can work itself out, especially in the States. We need to fix this whole blockade of a Senate and system, whole swath of 50% of the country that wants to just throw caution to the wind. It's really wild. Like, I can't. It's so impressive that people don't see the propaganda. They don't see how they're being manipulated into thinking and siding with people who don't have their best interest in mind. And that goes both ways. I mean, it's understandably hard for um, the system to work when you have top 1% of people having all the money. Then they can lobby and talk to the people making the laws and governing really easily, and it makes sense for them to pay to do so. Whereas the average person just living their life has no say except for their vote. And we're trained and inclined to believe that our vote doesn't matter. If we live in specific sections of America, your vote kind of doesn't matter, depending on gerrymandering and the systems at play. Like, I honestly think it would be better if it was more gridded out, if it was more just like a static system that made more sense of building these things. Because these districts, they are very clearly not um, standard. They look like ink blot tests for sure. There is definitely some weirdness going on with them. And I'm sure whoever made it has their reasoning, and some of it is definitely racial bias and cultural bias and classist. So it's really hard. But there's a chance that in another year that we're gonna have Biden v. Trump part two, or possibly Kamala, because of age things and desire things. Although it's interesting that Kamala hasn't really done a whole lot. Like, she's probably done a whole lot because she's, the 51st vote in the Senate, but it doesn't feel like she's doing a whole lot from the personal perspective, even of someone who's more informed than most people like me. It, you're not hearing about her the same way you heard about Joe Biden with Obama, maybe because there's not enough memes. But this is a really cool ice pattern, by the way. Like, look at this. It's got layers going. Still super hollow underneath. Get like frozen waterfall. And I guess that's part of it. We're so easily distracted that it doesn't quite matter. Like, it comes into the forefront and then it washes away like the creek. It's so easy to move on to the next thing, and the news cycle keeps going. But do your best to do what's good for you. Do your best to do what's good for the people around you. Keep spaces nice. Enjoy what you can to make sure that you're doing great and thriving with those around you. So until next time, I hope you all have a better day. Make your spaces a little bit better. I hope that everyone does well. So if you want to see more of me, be sure to follow on YouTube if you're watching on Twitch, and if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to follow me on Twitch. The link will be below. So I appreciate all the follows, likes, subscribes. They really help. I am doing my best out here, and I hope all you can do the same. So until next time, be better.